Hi everybody, tonight we're going to start our discussion of national income and price determination, which is Krugman model, module 16. We're going to break this into two class sessions, so we'll cover some of this tonight and then you can cover the rest of it on Thursday night. Tonight we're going to cover the multiplier. So the first part of this outline will cover marginal propensity to consume, and we'll cover the spending multiplier. These are really important concepts as we go into discussions of consumer spending and then investment spending. So we'll spend a full class period on this to make sure we're really solid on it. So as a little bit of background, the federal government recently enacted what you guys may recall, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The stimulus package that they talked about, which was $787 billion, was supposed to spark job growth. And in so doing was going to reverse the worst recession since arguably the Great Depression. So how is this supposed to work? Well, the short answer is that a dollar of spending in one area of the economy multiplies into more than a dollar of spending throughout the economy. Remember the circular flow diagram where money spent by one person is received as income by another person, and that circular flow means that that dollar or some portion of that dollar is going to travel around and around through the economy. Let's talk about how that happens. First, we're going to discuss marginal propensity to consume. So remember that consumer consumption is a huge fraction of total spending in the economy. It's actually close to 67%. Now, after someone pays taxes, they're left with disposable income, we call Y sub D, that can either be consumed or saved. So here we have a simple equation, Y sub D equals C plus X. So disposable income equals what's going to be consumed or saved. By definition, there are only two things you can do with your money after you pay your taxes. Now, when a person gets more disposable income, or Y sub D, he will increase both C and S. The marginal propensity to consume, or MPC, is nothing more than the change in consumption over the change in disposable income. So, change in consumption over the change in disposable income. Another way to put it is the marginal propensity to consume is the amount by which consumer spending rises if current disposable income rises by $1, and is the slope of the consumption function, which we'll discuss in a minute. Now, on the other hand, the marginal propensity to save, right, because you're either consuming or saving, is the change in saving over disposable income. So here, change in saving over change in disposable income. By definition, marginal propensity to consume plus marginal propensity to save equals 1 because you have to do one or the other. Let's take an example. So here's a table that shows hypothetical consumption for a household. Now note that even when disposable income is 0, there will be some consumption because a household will draw down savings or borrow money in order to keep that household afloat. The $5 of consumption when YD is called, when Y sub D equals 0 is called autonomous consumption. We'll come back to that in a little bit. So look at this table. As you see disposable income increase, you're also seeing a positive change in consumption. You're seeing a positive net change in savings. And then the marginal propensity to consume for this hypothetical household, as you see here, because these are linear, you see it as 0.8. Marginal propensity to save, which is 1 minus marginal propensity to consume, is 0.2. So we can see in the table when disposable income increases by $10 every $10 step, consumption increases by 8, and savings increases by 2. So here's the derivation. Here are the formulas, or the equations rather, that got us to these 0.8 and 0.2. So bottom line, if this household receives $1 of additional disposable income, they will consume 80 cents and save 20 cents of it. So with this information, we can create a consumption function. Now, before you get too worried on this, I'm not going to ask you to calculate a consumption function for me, and you're not going to have to do it on a test. What you need to do is understand the relationship between consumption and disposable income. So the consumption function is really nothing more than an equation showing how an individual household's consumer spending varies with the household's current disposable income. Now, the simplest version of the consumption function is a simple linear equation, again, here. where A, just as a note, so consumption, this is autonomous consumption plus marginal propensity to consume times disposable income. I just want you to understand this relationship and be able to relate back to me the linear nature of this consumption function. Let's talk about the spending multiplier. So if we assume that everyone in the economy spends 80% of every additional dollar, so that marginal propensity to consume is 0.8, what would happen if there was an injection of new spending into the economy? Well, we touched on earlier this idea that the federal government put in this stimulus packet of $787 billion. They were assuming that a lot more than $787 billion would end up getting spent. Let's talk about how that happens. Well, it happens because of something called the spending multiplier. Let's take an example. So Ted's a chicken farmer in a local community. He decides to spend $1,000 on chicken coops at Anthony's Farm Supply Shop. This $1,000 now starts to be circulated around in the economy. Anthony now has $1,000 from the sale, and he spends 80% or $800 on clothes at Marsha's boutique. Now, in reality, would he spend all of that for the $1,000? Probably not, but would he spend it all on clothes at Marsha's boutique? Probably not. But marginal propensity to consume at 80% means that $800 is what he would spend. It just wouldn't probably be all in one place. But for simplicity, that's what we'll assume here. Marsha now has $800. She spends 80% of it to fix her car. Pat, who owns the car garage, now has $640 from the sale and spends 80% at Diana's grocery store, and on and on and on. You'll notice here that after 5 rounds of spending, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you add up all of those spending amounts, we've created $2,361, more than double the original injection of spending. Now, if we had actually continued until someone was trying to spend 80% of nothing, so see how this number is going down until it got to 0, we'd actually have a total of $5,000 in income in spending. That's the nature of the multiplier. So again, this $1,000 would eventually get turned into $5,000 in spending because each person, each recipient spends 80%. Short story is that dollar moves from pocket to pocket to pocket to pocket, every dollar that is spent. Here's how we can write out the spending multiplier. So the multiplier equals 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume, which in our example is 1 over 1 minus 0.8 equals 1 over 0.2 equals 5. So the multiplier is 5. Now, since the marginal propensity to consume plus the marginal propensity to spend equals 1, the identity we identified earlier, we can also say that the multiplier equals 1 over the marginal propensity to save. Keep in mind the multiplier can also be defined as the ratio of the total change in real GDP caused by this autonomous change in aggregate spending to the size of that autonomous change. To look at the wider formula here, autonomous change in aggregate spending is here, AAS, delta AAS. Delta Y is the total change in real GDP, and the multiplier then is equal to delta Y over delta AAS. So this is what we've just defined. The multiplier here, delta Y over delta AAS, is equal to 1 over 1 minus the marginal propensity to consume. This is a lot to take in 7 or 8 minutes. We will do plenty of practice on this tomorrow. What I want you to get down for tonight is the idea of the spending multiplier, what it means, the idea that a consumption function can be graphed out like this, an understanding of what happens here with this marginal propensity to consume and marginal propensity to save. And being comfortable with that, again, we'll give you until end of class tomorrow to say we're comfortable with it. We ought to be able to move on to the next portion of Module 16. That is it. Have a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow.